All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that demonstration on Lightning, and we're gonna move on with our first major topic for the day, our first major topic of 3 topics, and it's gonna focus on mining. So we're gonna kick it off with a panel, and then we will do a couple of demos. So for this panel, it may look a little bit unbalanced since it's being dominated by slush pool, but people were invited, and it's the first year of a conference, and they will certainly be here next year for a very diverse panel. But the fact that you guys are a pool probably have a lot of insights into the entire mining industry. And of course, we also have JamesHillard, who was on our panel yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and let everyone introduce themselves. I am Tone Vays. Most people are familiar, and you are watching this on the YouTube channel. James, tell a few words about yourself and how are you involved in the mining space, and then we'll let everybody else do the same.
Hi. Hello? Is that working? Okay.
Maybe.
Hi. I've been doing commercial mining, software development and firmware development for miners for a number of years, although I'm not currently doing it right now. I'm still very familiar with the industry.
What are you guys mining, or what were you guys mining?
I've mostly dealt with Bitcoin mining, SHA-256 algorithms, although I've worked with some altcoins as well.
I'm JanCapek. I'm a co-founder of Brains, and we've been involved in Bitcoin since 2013, where we started operating and developing Slushpool. And now we have a new project called Brains OS, which is an open source initiative to fix the mining industry a little bit, and we probably get to this a little bit later.
I'm Slash. I founded Slushpool back in 2010, and in 2013 I invited guys to work on Slushpool with me, and I basically co-founded Trezor at these dates, and I'm involved in Trezor since 2011 and full-time since 2013.
Hi, I'm Pavel Moravec. I'm the other co-founder of Brains, and I'm basically responsible for development of Slushpool and other projects which I'm not allowed to speak about.
All right, so let's, I guess we'll start at the beginning, right? Because Slush, well, we'll actually start with you as founder. This was the very first pool. How did that came about? And clearly this was something that was a little unexpected. And what kind of ramifications did that have? Because, people that want to demonize Bitcoin are still saying, well, pools wasn't something that was anticipated. It was supposed to be one CPU, one vote. So tell us about the thought process that went into creating the first mining pool, and how do you think it changed the industry? And then we'll let other people comment.
Basically, when I started back in 2010, it was a time of moving miners from CPU to first GPU miners. And I was not interested in mining since the beginning. I was more interested in the payment layer on top of this. But then I tried to mine with my poor computer without any GPU, and it doesn't work. It didn't work. So I bought one GPU, and it generated something, but I realized that it's slowly getting down the mining reward. I was just thinking how I can stay in the game longer, and then I realized that it would be cool to work together with other guys on the mining rewards to be able to get part of the 50 BTC more frequently. So yeah, it was just idea in bathroom, and then I work on that more, and it with the help of guys from community, and everything is recorded on Bitcoin Talk, where the idea has born. So with the help of guys from community, I came up with the first prototype back in December 2010.
And how do you think it changed the industry?
I think it's unfair to say that the pools lead to centralization of the Bitcoin. I think it's quite the opposite, because it enabled for normal guys like me back then to stay in the game for much longer and be able to compete first mining farms which get created since 2011 or something like this. So I actually believe it's the opposite, because the pools allow crowds to stay in the game even with a single miner today.
All right. Anybody else want to comment on the pools, the concept of pools in general? Jump in.
Maybe one thing that's generally a shift in the perception of the pooled mining is that, like Slush said, that initially it was like single guys who wanted to do mining, and there were like bigger farms already in the game, and they wanted to participate. And now the shift is actually on the farm level, where the big farms want to join the pool because they don't want to make the mistake of like mining with some error in their firmwares or in their setup, which would lead to big financial losses for them. So they actually use the pools because they're sure that the work that they're getting and the work that they're submitting works within the Bitcoin network and is validated and is correct. So this is the shift in the perception, and at the same time, pools still allow those single individuals participate in mining, but obviously not on such a large scale. We have the electricity cost thing, so usually people who are individuals don't have access to cheap electricity, which actually determines the geolocation where you can do the mining now.
Yeah, and I really like the way you phrased it. You mentioned if single guys wanted to mine, because once they had the opportunity to mine on pools and they connected a bunch of computers, they had a high probability of becoming single guys with running a bunch of miners. No one really got that joke. That's bad. James, were you guys running a pool, or were you guys just self-mining?
I've run pools, a number of them. I've also been involved in the development of a new pool mining protocol called BetterHash, which is designed to help decentralize mining by moving the transaction selection away from the pool side and just using the pool for the variance reduction, which is the main reason that small miners need to mine on a pool, because otherwise you're very unlikely to get any sort of reward at all.
All right, so I'm going to talk about one other historical topic that we had, and that was, I remember in 2015, Ghash captured 51% of mining hash power with their pool, and a lot of people panicked. The price dropped a little bit, and I think within a year, Ghash was down to less than 1% of mining power. Like thoughts, comments, and you're probably happy that, hey, it's a good thing our pool didn't hit 51%, because that could have been a big issue. Pavel, you want to comment on that?
We definitely don't want to have more than 50% of hash rate, like intentionally. Me personally, I would really like to have 30. It would be great, because it would not create a perception of we are too powerful, and we even try to let our miners be as free as possible, but still provide the service of running all the infrastructure and so on. But I think a lot of people in that day were afraid of what can happen when some miner has 51%, but it's not really good for miners themselves to be too strong, because if I use my power to do some attack allowed by 51%, I would shoot myself, because miners earn all their money through Bitcoin, and being able to attack the Bitcoin, it would definitely lead to some price movement. So there are a couple of possible attacks you can do really in a like not visible way, but there's not a lot of them. But being too strong, and it's not really useful for you. It's better to have like 3 pools trying to pretend that they are independent. Maybe it can happen, but being one single miner having such percentage is not really useful, I guess.
Slash, you want to add to that?
The example of GH was a great example that the hash rate can move pretty quick out of the actor, which can be possibly dangerous. And I think this is one of the nice example that the criticism of pools is not really well, the pools are not so big danger as it may look, because as the infrastructure is set up, it's really easy to move from bad actor to good actor if there would be any attack. Of course, I'm grateful that the GH didn't keep the 50 or over 50% share for a long time.
My comment is, if I remember correctly, GH was kind of like a cloud mining thing, and at the same time it allowed connecting other miners to their pool. But I think the majority of their hash rate was something that they produced themselves. And at some point, obviously, the global hash rate, all the manufacturers of the ASIC devices sort of caught up with the market, and they, overwhelmed the market with these things, and people pretty much didn't have incentive to connect their hash rate to Ghash. So that peak when they were like really rising to 51%, it was a combination of hash rate connecting to them. At the same time, they had like big amounts of in-house hash rate that they were selling. So that was the incentive for people to actually trade the hash rate over there.
Well, speaking of cloud mining, I'm pretty critical of cloud mining in general. James, I think you're a little more supportive of it. Give us some comments, because I'm curious, because to me, cloud mining always will become dangerous. I mean, there is a 90% chance it'll eventually become a Ponzi scheme because you keep selling hash rate, and the moment you realize, oh, I'm a little bit under, you either have to admit, and then everyone will get mad at you, or you try to like somehow fix it, and then the problem just gets worse and worse and worse. What are your general thoughts?
Well, cloud hashing on, say, a small scale, like or distributed amongst different independent cloud hashing providers, it's probably not a very large risk to Bitcoin. But in situations where you have, say, one manufacturer producing most of the hardware and hosting most of the miners, then that starts to become a major issue. And I believe one issue with Ghash actually was that Ghash had very poor block propagation to external pools, which essentially was reducing the profitability of all other pools and increasing theirs. So they had good internal block propagation, say, between their internal pool nodes, but essentially, if you control 50% of the hash power, even if you're not, say, directly attacking the Bitcoin network, you inadvertently end up attacking all the other pools by essentially like waiting 10 or 20 seconds before accepting their blocks.
Right, and that was my biggest criticism as to why bigger blocks are bad, because of block propagation time. So go ahead, feel free to comment on bigger blocks and propagation, and also the concept of cloud mining.
So the cloud mining part is, I think the risky thing is long-term contracts where you sort of rely on the fact that somebody is going to deliver the thing, and by the time he's going to deliver the thing, there are some additional risk involved, like hardware manufacturing, which may not be able to keep up with the deadlines and so on. So overall, if if there is a space here for things like this, there should be some insurance and some other people willing to take the risk, and obviously being rewarded for that. As of the block propagation things, I think the way Bitcoin is currently set up with the roughly 2 megabyte block boundary is sufficient with the current bandwidth, what we have. And obviously, there are other layers that are being used for propagation of the blocks outside of the regular Bitcoin network that we're using as a pools, like Matt Curl's fiber network project, which is essentially a Bitcoin protocol extended with some error corrections and basically forward error correction. So you can think about it like today when you want to send a message to somebody, the network protocol is set up the way that you send the message. If it doesn't arrive, it's going to resend it. But theoretically, it's a better thing to send a little bit more data, being able to recover the missing parts than doing the whole resending. So this is the way the fiber is set up, and these are the layers that we're using for propagating the blocks. So I don't think it's an issue in this.
Yeah, I would add that the situation back in the GHAS days was significantly different than it was today. The Bitcoin core client was an order of magnitude almost slower at propagating blocks back then. Nowadays we have compact blocks, which is generally supported by all nodes, and yeah, the fiber network, and the predecessor to the fiber network, I believe, was started because of GHAS, essentially, by Matt Corallo, and that was the original Bitcoin relay network. And these work by essentially pre-synchronizing the memory pools, or pre-synchronizing transaction lists of transactions that will likely be in a block, and then and then essentially just sending short identifiers in order to attempt to reconstruct the blocks. And this is this significantly would reduce the block transmission latency, since instead of having to send the entire block when a block is found, you just have to send the short IDs needed to reconstruct it, at least most of the time, unless you got a collision or were missing something. But even then, if you're, say, missing just one transaction, then this, you would only have to resend that transaction, for example. So this has helped significantly reduce the block propagation. Now, there's a bit of a trade-off in terms of bandwidth. These optimizations for reducing the block transmission latency use a lot more bandwidth overall when, say, you're not actually propagating a block, but just relaying transactions in the memory pool. And fiber, for instance, is even further optimized on that sense, in that it'll essentially not care about, it'll use the whole pipe, essentially sending the block data with forward error correction in order to transmit as low latency as possible without caring about how much bandwidth gets used.
All right.
Yeah, well, one more thing to this. From user perspective, you can see that block propagation between pools is not a big problem. You can see it directly by number of orphan blocks. It used to be much higher number. So if pool finds a block, it needs to propagate to all the network, and all the other miners need to start mining on the last block. And if you are not fast enough with the block propagation, other miners can find different block, not based on your block, but on the previous one, and your block is orphaned. And number of orphans in the network is really nice measure how to see how the block propagation between pools works. And if you look at the numbers today, the number is really small, because all the pools are well connected, and the bigger blocks are not a big issue for the big pools because they are set up in a way that they communicate with each other on the fast protocol, and the delay is pretty small. The block size is much more interesting from users' perspective who has their own nodes, and if they relay all the transactions, then the technical requirements for running the node, this is the point where it is more important than for pools. We don't care for ourselves if the block is slightly larger or not, but for the network as a whole, it's interesting.
I would like
I got a bunch of other topics, so make it real quick.
Well, I would like to add one point to the cloud mining. Many people don't understand the difference in between pool concepts and cloud mining. And I think the situation is quite similar like with having private keys. While using pools is quite okay because you can easily switch. Using cloud mining, which has been popular before quite a lot, is quite dangerous because not your miner is not your road in the rules. So cloud mining is incentivizing centralization of power, which pools not.
Yeah, no, that's well said. So the three topics that I still want to cover real quick, one of them is going to be, what miners are coming up, like how technology is improving. I want to talk about, does price drive hash power or does hash power drive price? And I want to talk about miner decentralization or centralization. But before we get into those three, one sentence answer from each of you. Now, we all know, everyone in this room, everyone watching this channel knows that we can't do a hard fork because it's not going to happen. It will just split. But assuming hard forks were possible, what do you think is the optimal block size? Assuming you had the power, if you were Satoshi and you started Bitcoin, what would be the optimal? Is it something like Luke Dash Jr. wants to do? With current technology, by the way, assuming Schnorr gets in, what do you think if it was possible? Do you go under 1 megabyte? Do you stay with 1 megabyte because that's the sweet spot? Or would you go higher and you think that would be good?
If I would be a Satoshi, I would be a benevolent dictator and I would change appropriately.
I would be thinking about the Bitcoin as a settlement layer, so I would be happy with what we have now. So it's not like 1 megabyte, right? It's like 1.7 efficiently.
Right.
So this is enough. I wouldn't probably want to go the other way around.
Right. That's why Luke wants to lower it. And
he has some interesting reasoning for that, but overall, I mean, I don't have such deep insight into the Bitcoin protocol to explain it.
I mean, I'd say right for the moment we're pretty much roughly at what we should be. There's been some proposals for variable block size. The tricky part is to make sure the incentives are appropriately aligned so that you don't end up just overwhelming a bunch of nodes with too high resource usage requirements.
All right, let's jump into, unless you want to comment.
I didn't get a chance. I'm pretty okay with the size we have right now. I think we can go slightly higher in a time, but the scarcity of the block space creates nice pressure for innovation, which we really need in the space. So I'm quite okay with the situation we have right now because it forces us to do other things just then to making the blocks bigger, which would obviously be a problem for the users.
All right, we'll save the price talk for last. Let's briefly talk about miner decentralization. Is mining decentralized? Could it be better? Is it better than? Are you more than happy with it right now? And what's going on with Bitmain? And did that help miner distribution, decentralization around the world? Maybe we'll start on that end and go this way.
I think it's not a binary question, like centralized or decentralized. It's really all the time somewhere in between. We can see strong, like bigger farms are increasing, so in this sense, hash rate is concentrating a bit, but at the same time, I don't think we are in a worse situation that we were like 1 or 2 years ago, because the critical thing is we have right now more than one hardware manufacturer, which completely changes the space. So in this sense, what happened with Bitmain is, from my perspective, a good thing. I'm not wishing anybody anything bad, but it created a lot of problems, let's say, if you have only one single dominant hardware manufacturer, because it starts with the miners, and if you have the hardware, you control a lot of things. So if there is more supply, it just makes whole the space better in this sense. So yeah, this is my take.
I probably wouldn't say it differently. I have 2 more cents to the whole centralization thing. From geographical perspective, I see there's a lot of decentralization, and essentially following the exchange rate evolution for the past year, essentially the miners were the ones who were optimizing their costs, so they're really moving, or they're already at the locations with the cheapest energy, and obviously they are not in one space in the world. They are from the US through Canada to China and other areas around the globe, so I think the decentralization level is pretty good. Obviously, a counter argument could be about those individual guys. Finally got the joke. Who are not major players in the game. What may be interesting is the manufacturing adventure here, where people still don't realize, yes, we do have multiple manufacturers, but do we have the numbers? What is the amount, or how big is their production? What are they able to supply under the current market conditions? And we still come with the conclusion that the majority of the devices out there that are mining are the oldest 9s, and whatever is coming, we'll discuss the technologies after this, is questionable. A major shift from back in 2010 or 11 is that most of the hardware is not open source anymore, which could be a major security issue, because we really don't know what these things could be doing if they're not hashing, or if they're hashing at full power. We had this ASIC boost affair lately, and I'm going to talk about it when I'm showing the toys over there. So yeah, that's it. Much more things, but that's it.
I think the decentralization of mining is pretty okay, unless the actors are competing each to other. So far this part is pretty okay. It could be better, but it's in my opinion okay. The worst part is the vendor lock-in and the supply chain of the miners and the production capacities and so on, where the dirty political game starts. So we need competing amongst minor suppliers as well, and I think we'll be good.
Yeah, and that's one of the last 2 topics left. So James, comment on the decentralization or the distribution of mining, your view, and then kick us into what do you see coming down the pipe with advancements in technology in the mining space?
Well, right now, I think the situation's, I mean, it's not ideal, but it's not a major issue either right now, just because I think the incentives are aligned in a way that makes it unlikely that we'd get a major issue with miners attacking the network at this point. I think largely because we have more people also now realizing that it's not the miners that control the consensus rules of Bitcoin, which is a big thing, in that it's the users and economic users of Bitcoin that are really controlling that, and the miners are then incentivized not to go against the majority of the economy, because otherwise the coins they'd be selling would not be worth nearly as much.
And what do you see coming down the pipe with the latest, GMO, or what was that, one of the Japanese companies. I forgot the name of it. It was supposed to release something. Dragon Mint. We heard big things, and it looks like that slowed down. Well, like, what do you see? Like, if you're gonna buy mining equipment, I mean, what are you looking for? Like,
it's hard to say. I mean, there's a number of major manufacturers that are still shipping shipping hardware. You know, probably even the bigger centralization is the chip fabrication, actually, rather than just the mining hardware menu, like Bitmain and Avalon is just like, say, for instance, TSMC, I believe, is probably producing the vast majority of the chips.
And do you guys at Slush Pool, do you know what type of equipment people are connecting to your pool? Do you see these trends, or you have no idea what miner is being connected?
Well, sort of. As I said, like the majority still are the S9s, but we can see some new equipment coming. I think the biggest problem of the last year was that people got really excited about the 7-nanometer technology, which is far from being mature, and the question is if it's like really suitable for producing hashing chips, because the process itself is still not evolved enough, and you get like really bad yields. So technically, I mean, Bitmain came out with some 7-nanometer devices, but they're not able to sustain the production because the production costs are really high. So I think the whole point is try to manufacture the chips as cheap as possible, trying to have some low energy solutions, and that becoming an efficient miner. So there were a couple players in the game now that are able to reach something like 50 joules per terahash calculated.
One more thing, Bitcoin has really simple hashing function, so it allows to create pretty simple hardware for it, which is a great thing, because when there is more competing parties trying to create the best miner, there is a physical limit what you can achieve by the technology, and the simpler the hashing function is, the closer you can get by a competition, which is a great thing, because right now we are pretty close to physical limits of what we can do in the technology. So from like community or the whole ecosystem perspective, this is a great thing, because we can expect that the manufacturers will converge to the same efficiency roughly. They copy from each other, so the physical machines, not technically only the chips, are similar and similar, because if your competitor can create something more efficient, your next generation is going to be better as well, because they can teach from each other. And on the chip level, we are already on the boundary of what the silicon technology can do. So in this sense, I don't think we will be in a worse spot in the future from this perspective, which is a great thing.
I would like to thank Satoshi for choosing these algorithms for mining, and I think all the initiatives for ASIC resistance are nonsense, for reason as Pavel said.
All right, awesome. All right, so here's the last main topic, and this involves the price of Bitcoin. I believe that the price of Bitcoin drives the hash rate, and I think it's being proven right now as we're seeing some miners are shutting down and the hash rate is dropping as the price continues to drop. How dangerous do you think this can get if the price continues to fall, as some of us analysts are kind of expecting? I personally do think there is a low point where it becomes a serious problem. Now, I will probably never turn off my one Avalon miner connected to Slush Pool, but that's not gonna find me a block. I just like supporting the network. I think there'll be enough people in the future to mine at any price of Bitcoin at a loss because it supports their payment methods. But what is your view on, and what do you think the true break-even is? Because I think as a lot of these major operations shut down because their electricity is too high, you got to move that equipment somewhere else. Like they're mostly in like dangerous countries like Venezuela, but if you can get your equipment there, you can mine pretty cheap. So what's your view on the whole price angle versus hash power?
So the break even is not something that's the same for all miners. It's highly variable depending on where you're located. So you're going to see when you get a price drop, you're going to see the miners that have more expensive power dropping off the network much quicker than some with lower power. And also, a lot of the time, their miners are going to be running on fairly long-term agreements, say, with a power company and purchasing power. So there's going to be a good amount of lag time, I would say, between a price drop and the hash power actually dropping off the network. You also get difficulty drops too, which then can potentially counteract the price drop somewhat. Just depends on how many miners end up dropping off the network. But yeah, that can be a problem if only a few of the larger, more centralized mining farm operations are essentially the only ones that would be able to profitably mine. Yeah, then you have a high risk of getting a lot of centralization on the network. But yeah, it's an issue, but I think for the moment it's not a huge risk to the network yet.
I probably just add one thing. I agree with pretty much everything that James said. The distribution of the hashing power is already settled in areas where the miners are actually already hedging against the price drop. So they have, like, I would say, a big buffer where they can see the price of Bitcoin going to until they really have to switch off the operation. And again, like James said, it's a positive feedback loop, sort of. When you have the hash rate dropping, you also at some point have the difficulty dropping, which means the miners that stayed in the game would be gaining more Bitcoin, which could compensate for partial drop in the price. So,
from different perspectives, mainstream media are full of alarming articles how mining is not ecological. It's making a lot of pollution, and I'm actually afraid of another extreme, that without spike or a rise of the Bitcoin price, we may have the opposite problem. That we won't have enough security, enough mining for securing the Bitcoin because of the Bitcoin reward going because of the halving. So yeah, I'm looking forward in the future, and I'm interested in the Bitcoin price in the future because if it will be steady, we may have a problem.
One more comment. I don't think there is a break even. Like if the price goes down, the only problem connected with it is the more miners is out of the game, the easier is to buy all the non-usable or currently not used hardware and attack the network. Because we already mined for $1 a Bitcoin. So it's not technically a thing about price. It's about available hardware capable of joining in and attacking the network. So if the price goes really deep and a lot of hardware is just in some store or whatever, you can go and take it and use it for a lot of interesting things if you have the hash rate majority. I think this is the only thing which is a problematic way. Of course, people can lose money buying hardware and dropping the price, so they maybe would need to stop mining. But for the whole system, the only problem I can see is the available hardware not hashing at that point of time.
I would add to that, it's probably not all that bad because you need more than just hardware. You need the power infrastructure, and that actually often has even longer build-out times than even manufacturing the hardware, depending on what scale you're operating at.
Of course, but right now the barrier is to get the hardware. It's for me, it's the largest barrier. If you have enough money, you can set up a lot of things. It's normal engineering basically, but it's problem to get enough hardware to attack the network. But once the hardware is available, there is completely different situation then. But we can argue about it.
Yeah, so we already have Jan setting up for the demo. Hold on, guys. For the demo on the miners, everything going okay?
Yeah, it's going good. When you guys switch the screen, I will just give you a brief overview what you're going to see. I was praying to the demo gods because this is like a little bit of things that could go wrong all at the same time. So I will basically demonstrate an open source firmware running on these two devices, which look very similar, but they're from different manufacturers. But in order to start mining, like the first thing that you have to do, you have to register with the pool. So we would go through the...
Wait, hold on. Are you going into your demo already? Or not yet?
Just tell me when I'm ready to start.
No, not yet.
Okay.
I just want to close off the panel. There are so many other cool topics we could have covered, plus the audience questions. I just thought of one more in the last minute. During the hard fork of Bcash into Bcash and Bcash, one of the mining pools took hash power from Bitcoin and redirected it to themselves. Your thoughts on that? Because I'm surprised no one is suing them for this. And how can this be prevented going forward?
Choose the right pool.
Choose the right pool.
All right, guys. There's so much more we can talk about as far as mining, but we're going to have to end it here, and we will go into the demo of the Brains OS. Maybe, are you ready to go?
Ready.
All right, so for the live stream, we're going to pause for like a minute, and then I'll introduce you because it will be a standalone video.
Okay,
but,
sounds good.
Thank you so much, guys. This was an awesome panel.